And welcome to Climate Chat. I'm your host, Dan Miller, and today our special guest is Katharine Gage, a student activist who is trying to get other students involved in solutions to climate change, a very particular one called carbon fee and dividend. And we're going to get into the details of that. First, before we get started, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, do all those things, share the video, because it really helps get the message out. And that's why we're here, is to try to inform people about climate change, the problems and the solutions. And this is one of the solutions one, so a little more upbeat maybe than some of the other shows we do. And with that, Katharine, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for having me.
And I think the way we actually met is, I think your dad, I think it was, posted a tweet about like all the best carbon fee and dividend videos on the internet, and he included mine as one of them. So I thank him for that. But then he said, "There's this new one, and from you," and so I watched that. Thought you did a great job, and I thought, we don't actually talk about carbon fee and dividend much on Climate Chat, because I do have my TEDx talk, which, by the way, yours and mine are both linked in the description below. But I thought it'd be a great opportunity to, first of all, highlight your work, and not just on carbon fee and dividend, but building a student movement, which we're going to talk about. But also, you and I can have a discussion about fee and dividend. But before we do all that, please give us a little bit of your background.
Oh, thanks, Dan. That sounds great. I just graduated from Bowdoin College in Maine, and I studied Earth and Oceanographic Science. I'm from New Hampshire originally, and I got into climate advocacy in middle school kind of by accident because my dad got really worried about climate change and then joined this grassroots group called Citizens Climate Lobby. And I sort of just started going along to things with him, and then without really being super invested in it myself, but then I sort of saw how important it was, and then continued to be involved in that, and then started leading a group in my high school that did similar work, and then continued that on in college. And then I more recently became involved in the carbon fee and dividend movement, which started in one of the Citizens Climate Lobby chapters and is a student movement for the most effective climate policy. So I led a group at Bowdoin doing that for the past 4 years, I guess, and also more recently started being a co-president of the movement on a national level, where we're working to expand it to more schools. And I'm taking a gap year to do some like outdoor seasonal work, and then I'm going to grad school in Colorado for environmental management, where I'm going to continue working on the carbon fee and dividend movement for my master's project.
Wow, that's quite a bit. And you got started in middle school, which is really something, I guess. Did your fellow middle schoolers think you were kind of strange working on this at the time, or did they
No, I
even
did
like
not
know what
tell
you
them
were
about
doing
it.
or anything?
No, I didn't want them to find out about it,
Oh,
so
serious.
they yeah, they were unaware, but I don't think it was the cool thing to be doing in middle school.
Well, actually, I think it is, but yeah, but the kids might not agree. Sure. Okay. Well, before we get into all these other things and the movement itself, uh, the thing that you're advocating for is called carbon fee and dividend, or fee and dividend, and probably some other names. It needs a better name. I think everyone kind of agrees that maybe that's not the best name. Oh, you had your dad had a different name. What was that?
Oh, carbon cashback.
Carbon cashback. Yeah, I like that, and you'll see why that's appropriate in a moment. But why don't you start by leading us through what is carbon fee and dividend, or carbon cashback?
Yeah, so this is a national level policy that we're hoping to get passed in the US, and it has three parts. So first is the carbon fee, which charges a fee on fossil fuel production right at the source, like the coal mine, for example. And it starts low, around $15 per ton of carbon dioxide emissions, which translates to about 13 cents more per gallon of gasoline. And then the fee increases steadily every year. So we all know that it's going to get higher, and this will send a clear signal throughout the economy that clean energy is the best long term option. And then the second part of the policy is called the dividend because this carbon price is gonna raise a lot of revenue, but a concern with carbon pricing is that it makes things more expensive for us. So, to address this, like, returning all the money collected to people equally as a dividend helps protect low and middle income households, especially while we transition to clean energy. So we'll just get a check every month that will be an equal per capita share of the carbon dividend. And the third part of the policy is called a border carbon adjustment, which means we would charge the US carbon price on imports from other countries that don't have a similar carbon price. And this protects US businesses from becoming less competitive in the global market, and it also incentivizes all of our trading partners to also price carbon. So, this policy is super effective at reducing emissions domestically, and it also has this global impact of incentivizing similar climate policies around the world also.
Now, one criticism of carbon pricing in general is that it's a regressive tax. In other words, they hurt the poor the most because even though people who are poor don't produce as much carbon as a rich person does, for sure, but a very high percentage of what the money they do spend is on heating and gasoline and electricity, things that are driven, by energy and therefore would be impacted by a carbon price. But carbon fee and dividend is not like that. It's actually instead of that's called a regressive tax, it's actually an anti-regressive tax. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Why that is?
Yeah, I think a lot of I mean, obviously, our energy use can come from fossil fuels, but it's also just pretty much anything we buy likely has some fossil fuels were used in some
Mhm,
way of it being made and gotten to us. So, um, carbon footprint is pretty tied to consumption and the
mhm,
way that there's been studies that show that lower income households generally just have below average carbon footprints even if more percentage wise is spent on energy.
mhm.
So with a policy where everyone's getting the same dividend, the lower income households will disproportionately come out ahead.
That's right. I think there was a study that said 70% of the bottom 70% of households will make more money on the dividend than they pay in higher prices. And the lower you are on that, the more money you're getting. So it actually helps the poor the most, which is a very unusual kind of tax. Uh, and in some ways, you can think of it almost as a universal basic income and it's a pretty large number too. It's thousands of dollars per family per year kind of thing. So that's, I think, is a really important feature of it. Yeah. And so there's some, let's see, some there. It's not the only way to price carbon. There's others like cap and trade seems to have been like the go-to way to price carbon when, for example, California did it. When the EU started their carbon price, it was called something else, but it was essentially a cap and trade. Any thoughts on that and why cap and trade isn't as good as fee and dividend?
Yeah, I guess cap and trade is more setting a cap or a limit on the emissions and then businesses can kind of trade around for who is allowed to emit those emissions. And I think it's just not as straightforward and like it's nice to have a fee where it's predictable and it's easier for businesses to work with if they know um what the like, what the carbon price is gonna be, and then it's just clear to see, they can compare the clean energy option and the fossil fuel option and make the best financial long-term decision based on that. Um, so I think there's been some, industry and business resistance to cap and trade because it's less straightforward, and also, I know that's sometimes been done without a dividend, which
Oh
any
yeah,
way of making energy more expensive without a dividend is gonna increase costs for people and cause some pushback there. But I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add about
well,
that?
I think it's right. First of all, it's by its nature, what you make a certain amount of emissions credits. So where fee and dividend, puts the fee on the producer of the energy, right at the coal mine, the well, port of entry, right there. For cap and trade, you're going to only the big emitters like the power plants and the industrial emitters, and you're giving them, hey, we're going to have this many tons of emissions credits, and they auction them off. So you never know what the price is going to be. Year to year it could be very different. If there's a recession, price could drop really low and then they could go high. So no one knows what the future price is going to be, and it's volatile. So no one's going to really plan on it. They have no idea what it's going to be. So, and also it doesn't cover the entire economy like fee and dividend does. Fee and dividend goes right to the source of the energy. And therefore, even little sources, I mean, little emitters are covered because they're all paying higher price for that fossil energy versus hopefully the cheaper renewable energy. And so that the whole idea that you don't know, it's volatile, you don't know what the future price is, makes it hard to plan and therefore much, much less effective. But from a theoretical point of view, cap and trade, like if you're a policy wonk, from a theoretical point of view, it's the optimum way to allocate the resource through the auction. And so they think that's a good thing. But in reality, it's not. It's like great theoretically, but in reality, it's not. And that's why the European Union has constantly changed their carbon fee policy to be closer and closer to like a fee and dividend style, where they put a floor so you can't go below a certain price, and they kept narrowing that to essentially so it's a steadily increasing thing, just like fee and dividend. I don't know how they give the money back. So the giving the money back is also critical, and the reason is for a carbon price to work, it has to be as high as possible, right? The higher the price, the more effective it will be. But if you don't, if you make it too high and you don't give the money back to the public, they're going to all be up in arms, just like they're up in arms about the high fuel prices. Imagine if the fuel price doubled, but you got way more money in your pocket every month because of it. What you'd like to probably do is pocket that money and go get an EV, right? And you get to keep all of it. So that's the idea behind that. So we've covered that. The three huge essential things of the carbon policy, that reason carbon fee and dividend is so good, is one is you always know what the fee is going to be, and it's going to go up every year, like $15 a ton every year goes up. And so it's going to get up to a super high price. So no one's going to build a coal plant that's going to last 40 years because they know, or natural gas plant, because they know in 10 years, let's say, the price is going to be so high, it's going to make them non-competitive. So number one, always steadily rising, always known in advance, and everyone gets the money back, so they support a high price. Those are the three essentials as I see them. So
Definitely, yeah.
yeah. And so, all right, so now that's the policy, and as we just talked about, but the next step, of course, it's a great policy, but we don't have it here in the United States. What are you doing to try to change that?
Yeah, so we're in the carbon fee and dividend movement, the goal is to build support from students across the country for carbon fee and dividend. And the idea behind the CFD movement is it started by one student at William and Mary a few years ago brought this sign to the dining hall that said most effective climate policy, hashtag carbon fee and dividend, and then had this link bit.ly/write Congress here that is this super easy form letter people can send to Congress asking for carbon fee and dividend. Like it's already written, they just enter their contact information. And
Link is in the description, by the way, for that.
yeah. Um, and her idea was that students can start spreading this sign around and spreading the word about carbon fee and dividend. And then this will get more and more students to learn about the most effective climate policy because a lot of people just don't know and write to Congress to show their support because we need a lot more political will for Congress to pass this. And this sort of just spread around William and Mary over the course of that semester, and more students started displaying signs, and they would give presentations and do tabling and have stickers with the sign on them. Um, so that was really effective, and by the end of that semester, she said mostly everyone at William and Mary knew about carbon fee and dividend and was like generally supportive, and many had taken an action of writing to Congress about it. Um, and since this was so effective, more and more schools started joining the movement, and it's been in about 35 schools so far, anywhere from middle schools to high schools to colleges. Um, and we're working on getting it into more schools and working with students at the schools where the movement is active to help like more people on campus learn about it.
And what's the reception like? First of all, tell me a little bit about um, how students on campus just view climate change in general. Is it something that people talk about? Is it they show concern about it? What's kind of the mood when it comes to climate change and how much it's discussed? It's not discussed in the media now much at all. So I don't know if that translates into conversations on campus.
I think it's pretty from what I've seen, students are very concerned about it, and it might not be, like, the top thing on their mind, but most people are thinking about it and kinda concerned and are happy to take a quick, easy action that we're offering about it. I mean, I was studying earth and oceanographic science, so we talked about it a lot
Okay.
scientifically there,
Okay.
but so maybe my perspective is a little skewed, but I think even on the rest of campus, people are generally, like,
Yeah.
aware that it's a big deal or a big concern.
So how big is the movement? Like how many schools? How many students are involved? Where you're trying to get to?
Yeah, we've had 35 schools total involved. Not all of them are, like, active now because people have graduated and stuff,
Mhm.
but and we've sort of had, like, a couple like, maybe 1 student leader at each of the schools or maybe a few or, like, a club that's leading it, and then a lot of the involvement is like, students who will come and take a sticker and display it and email Congress and then tell a friend. Like, it's very low commitment for a lot of people, and I think that was a big goal of the movement is, like, students don't have time for, like, a huge like, joining a group and, like, becoming super involved. Like, not a lot of people are gonna do that, and obviously, we need people doing that too, and we have people doing that in the CFD movement, but a lot of the involvement has just been these quick little actions that can reach a wide number of people. Like, I think probably total at Bowdoin, we've definitely engaged, like, hundreds of people,
Oh, well.
like, quick actions and quick conversations, whereas our group of active people is, like, 5 or 10 total, like, in
Okay.
any given year.
And how many schools has it spread to so far?
Like, 35?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually quite good. That's impressive.
Yeah, definitely varying levels of, like William and Mary level is like, we're not all there yet, but yeah, it's exciting to have it in that many, and we're to hoping to spread to, like, hundreds of schools soon. Um, Definitely we wanna, like, get our infrastructure ready to, like, because 'cause we're doing a lot of, like, manual onboarding and, like, helping the student leaders, and we're starting to make some, like, leader teams within the leadership of the movement, but we wanna be ready to support more people as we're getting but we still have, like people are kind of steady stream joining the movement at different schools, which is exciting.
Wow. Okay. Now, is this part of Citizens Climate Lobby or is it like a separate organization?
Yeah, it started within the William and Mary chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and it's now a separate organization, just
Mhm.
because, like, it's a project that Citizens Climate Lobby groups can do among many other things, but it's also, like, a project that anyone can take on and doesn't have to be, like, Citizens Climate Lobby based. Like, we have lots of other, like, environmental clubs or clubs of
Mhm.
other environmental organizations that then can take the CFD movement on as a project. So,
Mhm.
we're technically a separate organization just because that's, like, easier, but we still work very closely with Citizens Climate Lobby, and when people graduate, we suggest that they join Citizens Climate Lobby if they're looking for
Okay.
more. And there's an action team within Citizens Climate Lobby that's working on recruiting more schools to join the CFD movement too.
Oh, okay. And Citizen Climate Lobby has been around for 19 years, and for the first most of that time, it was focused just on building fee and dividend, and they would visit every congressperson every year and things like that. And obviously, it didn't work so far. It got introduced into Congress many times. The
Yeah.
fee and dividend legislation, um, but it just hasn't worked yet. What are you hoping to change about that situation? Like, or how do you hope to change that situation? I should say.
Well, I think Citizens Climate Lobby made a ton of progress because when they first started lobbying, like, Congress hadn't heard of this at all, and it got to a
Mhm.
point where there'd been bills with, like, over 90 co-sponsors one of the times, there'd been bipartisan co-sponsors, and, um, I think that shows that this process of, like, grassroots work and building political will does work, and I think the goal with the CFD movement is that we wanna continue that, and the CFD movement is a slightly different approach than Citizens Climate Lobby, I guess. Our goal is to, like, get a lot more people involved to a lower commitment level, whereas Citizens Climate Lobby sort of trains this, like, committed group of volunteers, um, eh, more, but I think yeah, I think our main goal is just to continue that, and because there is a lot of support building for it in Congress, even though there hasn't been enough yet, and I think with the addition of other countries starting to charge border carbon adjustments,
Mhm.
that'll put an additional pressure on the US to price carbon, so I'm hoping that
The
along with,
EU,
like
yeah.
oh, sorry, what?
I was gonna say the EU has started doing that.
Yeah, they started this year, and I think the UK and Japan are starting in the next couple of years too. So, yeah, I hope that, like, that's gonna get the US seriously looking at pricing carbon, and I hope that with this advocacy, we can make it so that when this carbon price does happen, make it more likely that it's, like, steadily increasing, like you said, and, like, reaches high enough prices to actually drive down emissions substantially like we need to, and then also have a dividend so that it's good for people.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and the other thing I went to I'm actually, I did a TED talk, a TEDx talk on this too, and I've never been officially part of Citizens Climate Lobby. I always felt it was useful to show a broader coalition of people supporting this idea than does just this one group. But I did go to a Citizens Climate Lobby meeting quite a long time ago, 10 or 15 years ago, and I felt like I was the youngest person there. So I'm kind of glad that you're doing this and bringing students in because that's really important. And those students are going to end up being the ones in Congress voting for this after a while, hopefully not too long even. And also just spreading the word to the larger part of the population, not just the environmentally concerned or something like that, I think is going to go a long way. So really glad. By the way, so you do have this web page here. And again, all the links are in the description, including this one, the CFD movement website. We also have your a link to your TEDx talk. And by the way, we need to get the views on that up. So everyone, please go watch that and put a like in and maybe add a comment. And you'll learn a little bit more about Fee and Dividend and Catherine's backstory as well. And
Thank
the
you.
email Congress website that Catherine just mentioned is there. Catherine's LinkedIn page, so you can follow her on that. And also the email address, just if you want to get in touch uh, with Catherine. And speaking of that, um, what kind of help do you need? Like, what resources maybe outside of like the students themselves, or how can people watching this video help you?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so anyone can write Congress asking for carbon fee and dividend at the link that's posted. It's super easy, bit.ly/write Congress here, and you'll just have to fill out your contact information and you can edit the message if you want, but it's already written and it'll find your congressman and send it to them. And then spread the word too, like tell your friends and family, um, can get CFD stickers on if you wanna spread it that way or, like, put up posters or flyers. Students can join the CFD movement from this website, and anyone who joins, we will get in touch with and help you get it going at your school. If you're not a student, you can work to bring schools around you into the movement by like contacting the clubs about it or giving presentations. And anyone, also, if you're not a student, anyone can join Citizens Climate Lobby, which is now advocating for a number of different policies.
Right.
I think carbon pricing is still a component of that. And then so you can get involved in a lot more in Citizens Climate Lobby if you're interested. And then there's also the action team within Citizens Climate Lobby that works on bringing the movement into more schools.
Now, if I recall, there was, and this is a long time ago, but the Citizens Climate Lobby did a study with REMI. I remember, what it, Regional Economic Models Incorporated or something
I
like
think
that.
so.
And they said that the impact that the fee and dividend policy would have, do you recall some of those numbers, the positive impact would have on the economy?
Oh, yeah.
Because if I'm remembering, it would something like increase the GDP by $1 trillion. It was more than that, but I can't remember what the exact number was. It would create, I can't remember how many jobs, but 1 million jobs or something in that order of magnitude. Well, the numbers are in my, it's my TED Talk, but that's a long time ago, so that's why I don't remember it as well.
Yeah.
And so it's all these positive side effects. It's a policy that, besides making renewable energy more cost competitive, which it already is cost competitive, but it's still unfair because fossil fuels get trillions of dollars in subsidies. Uh, they don't pay for the health cost or the climate cost. The health cost is right now, the burning fossil fuels contributes to the deaths of 8 million people a year. There's a Harvard Medical School study that shows that, never even mentioned by anyone, ever talked about, which is pretty mind-blowing. It's the 1 out of 5 deaths on Earth is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. That's just the pollution part. That's not the climate change part. And then, of course, now you have the climate change part, which lasts for thousands of years. It's not like just a problem for today. And on top of that, so fossil fuels have enormous costs that are not in their price. And the idea of carbon fee and dividend is to put some of that. It doesn't really put it all, but to put some of it back into the price of the fossil fuels so that there's more of an equal playing field between renewables and fossil fuels. So anyway, that's why it's a good thing to do. Actually, I call it the second best way to phase out fossil fuels. The best way to phase out fossil fuels is to phase out fossil fuels. Just phase them out. We didn't, when we found out asbestos that's used in insulation in buildings causes cancer, we didn't put a price on asbestos or anything like that. We just banned it, and we can't ban fossil fuels because they can't. That would cause too much disruption if we tried to do that. But we could phase them out, and actually, I recommend doing both, like phasing them out and using carbon fee and dividend on top of it to sort of accelerate and try to squeeze it, from 2 different methods. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah,
And I think this policy would reduce US emissions 90% in 30 years, which is huge and
okay.
gets us most of the way to the climate goals that we've sort of committed to and are trying to meet, but obviously, like, lots more is needed too.
Well, that's really good because that's an update from the numbers that I heard because my talk was in 2014, and so and that was 50% over what time frame? I can't remember. So 90% over 30 years would be very good because that's about the time when we have to get down to zero, and we'll find a way to get that last 10%. Or by the way, we'll be able to do carbon capture. If you have the other thing about having a price on carbon, if you allow the people not to pay the price, if they remove that amount of carbon from the atmosphere, that gives a marketplace for carbon dioxide removal. And since we already have way too much carbon in the atmosphere, we've already emitted 2.7 trillion tons. That weighs more than all life on Earth weighs. We have to actually take some of that out of there, and actually eventually most of it out of the atmosphere. But it's very expensive to do now. But if we had carbon fee and dividend, there would be an economic incentive to lower the price of that and to scale it up. And that would then allow us to keep going on it even after fossil fuels are gone, to keep removing carbon from the atmosphere using low-cost technology as opposed to the high-cost technology we have now. Like even, I mean, to give an example of the way technology costs can drop, solar panels cost like 99% less than they did 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yes, and if you went 30 years ago, you would have said, well, solar panels are way too expensive. Like they're not a potential solution for the energy crisis. They're just too expensive. And now, of course, they're the cheapest form of energy in the history of the world or something. So, so now I'm not saying that carbon capture will get that cheap that fast, because there's like a different configuration. It's not just a chip in a way, but it really can drop a lot. And so carbon fee and dividend can be a tool for that as well. So not only reducing emissions, but also learning as a incentive to scale up carbon capture, which we also need as well. So, okay, that's that. So any other ways that folks out in the audience can help the movement? Are you looking for contributions, for example, or things like that? Or is it really just more, you're just trying to get everyone involved as much as possible?
No, thank you. We can't take contributions right now, but one of my goals in grad school is to make this a nonprofit organization. And then at that point, we'd be able to fundraise and hopefully hire staff. And so in 2 or 3 years, if you'd like to donate, that would be amazing. But for now, write Congress, spread the word, and join the movement, or encourage other schools to join the movement.
Right. And so the people out there are in college. And by the way, just college? Are you trying to get high schools too, or is it really focused?
Yeah, any schools.
Any
Middle schools have been involved too. Had some awesome ideas come out of the middle school groups.
Okay. All right. That's wow. Okay, that's great. And then if they're old folks like myself, but they either know the schools themselves or their kids are students at a school, they can help spread it that way. Tell them, tell all the students you know about it, and send them to this link, right? And then
Yes, definitely. Or yeah, you can find your local school environmental club and talk to them, or email the
okay.
college you went to's environmental club, or any ideas you have are great.
Okay, that's great. So let's see. I'm going to invite Stacy in. Let's see. We should switch to here. And Stacy is ready. So, and she's going to have her question, and then we're going to get to some YouTube questions as well. Hey, Stacy, welcome.
Thanks for being here, Catherine. It's so good to see young people involved and motivated, and I look forward to what you do in grad school. I learned today that Citizens Climate Lobby started from Fee and Dividend. Is that right?
It was started 19 years ago by Marshall Saunders, I believe, and with the idea. Well, they didn't come up with the idea of fee and dividend. That might have been. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go there. Someone came up with it, but Marshall thought it was a great idea, so he formed an organization to promote that idea.
Okay, and then the other, I guess it's kind of in the way. The other is oh, whoa, I was wondering, do you, like, I don't know the history of, oh, this has been brought up several times in Congress. When was the last time, and are there any, because wasn't that West Virginia guy even interested in it, possibly, which was so surprising to me?
I don't know if you
The middle of the road guy who
the
with
Democrat in the Senate,
the yacht and whatever, and the coal mine.
What?
Yes, that guy. Yeah. I mean, I know he's not there now, but it's like, it's surprising.
There was a lot of support, including Republicans at one point. But again, when the Republicans were supporting it, there was a different kind of Republican than exists now. You know, so now the U.S. is anti anything, right? Anti renewables. I mean, not the U.S., but the current administration, I should say. So I think it's a very different world. But that world's going to change in 2.5 years, and it's going to be far more progressive. Yeah.
Catherine, do you go to Washington at all?
Yeah, I've gone with Citizens Climate Lobby to lobby, I think pretty much every year since like 8th grade. And yeah, and then I also interned in a two congressional offices um a couple years ago because that sort of got me interested in like how all that works, and I thought that maybe I would want to work in climate policy there in the future too.
Which states were you representing?
Maine and New Hampshire.
Oh, okay. So like high school and college?
Yes, where I'm from and where I went to college.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay.
Well, there are some questions
Well, let's
here.
go
Do
to
you want
Eli then,
Eli first? Yeah.
and then we'll come back for those. So,
Sounds good.
okay. And welcome, Eli.
Thanks, Dan. So we are facing a super El Nino, which could be the worst in a long, long time, and could be pretty bad. It's entirely possible that could lead to economic hardship so bad that there's some kind of like stimulus check or economic relief that would be ordinarily like, racking up deficit spending. I mean, we saw how that went with COVID. Similarly, we are facing the looming risk of technological unemployment, and a universal basic income has been proposed for that, and there are different ideas about how to finance that. What I wonder is whether there's been any thought about doing the same thing as the fee and dividend, but packaging it in a very, very different way that would be more appealing to a number of constituencies. Mainly, there's a crisis. There needs to be massive government spending to relieve it, especially if it's something like El Nino. We come up with the money, and we don't deficit spend by putting the fee on carbon. And if it's something persistent like universal basic income, it can be part of a mix of financing. But once you get it started, then the collection side, then it could be easier to turn it into the freestanding carbon dividend on top of anything else. So thoughts on that, and whether that might in fact be more appealing to, say, college students who are facing technological unemployment.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. Sorry, I'm not too sure about like the feasibility of that way versus a straightforward implementing CFD. Um, I know maybe is universal basic income more of a progressive idea maybe, and whereas a revenue neutral carbon fee has been able to gain bipartisan support, that might be more appealing to Republicans. But if this is going to happen, like some sort of stimulus, then yeah, then I feel like I'm not sure. Dan, do you have any?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're making good points about bipartisanship. So the originally fee and dividend did have bipartisan support. Jim Hansen, who was one of the early proponents of fee and dividend, that's actually where I learned about it, was from him. And there's a comment here from Oliver Gill that says the concept of carbon fee and dividend was conceptualized by MIT professor David Gordon Wilson in the 1970s, and then popularized by climate scientist Jim Hansen in the late 2000s. I actually thought there was someone else involved, but anyway, that's good. And again, I learned it from Jim. But when he gave his 2012 TED Talk, he had a quote actually from a Republican supporting it as well. And actually, there was a Republican group with George Shultz and Jim Baker, two very prominent Republicans, sort of the head of that fee and dividend group. But it was really a little bit of a fake one in that it looked exactly like CCL's fee and dividend, except for one little thing. and that was the amount the fee went up every year was very little. It was like cost of living. So they kept the fee in the 50, but they started higher. So they kept the fee in the $50 range, and the fossil fuel companies are totally happy with that. If you keep it in the $50 range, they already have that built into their financial models. And like ExxonMobil supported fee and dividend, it was the headline. But of course, they supported a different version where the price didn't keep going up. But the general concept, it doesn't raise a penny for the government, right? 100% of the money goes back to the public. So it's not it's a policy that's it's not a tax that raises money for the government. So Republicans can like that, right? 100% of the money goes back to the public, and it helps correct a market failure, right? The fact that fossil fuels don't reflect their true cost to society is a market failure. In fact, the greatest market failure in history. And so there was, now again, the whole Republican Party today is very different than the Republican Party of George Shultz and Jim Baker. But there's probably going to be a reset on that too going forward. So we'll see how all that works out. But you're right that this and universal basic income, I would agree with you that that's not something that Republicans are going for anytime soon.
If there's a real hiring shut, if hiring really drops off a cliff, they'll get behind it. Just the way, the Trump administration put out the stimulus checks during the pandemic. It's not what they would have liked to do, but that was the solution to the problem that they faced. And similarly, we might face, other kinds of problems, especially if it's like El Nino driven. That would be really, really logical to say, yes, okay, so we can pay for this in part with a carbon fee, okay.
Right? Yeah. Well, actually, I think the way the universal basic income is going to be paid is all the robots doing the work for us. They'll be paying the taxes, and we'll be getting the benefits. At least that's the idea for the need. Both the need and the way you pay for it is that productivity shifts from humans to intelligent robots, and so someone should write a science fiction story about that. I think it's been done a few times, and we'll see how that turns out. Because actually, Katharine, I think you'll find out how that turns out, or your generation's about to find out how that turns out. Hey, Stacy,
it's not going to take that long.
It's not going to take that long. I know. Well, but in terms of like impacting the working folks, who just graduated from college and are seeking a job and they're competing against a robot or an AI or something like that, that's going to be exciting times. Stacy, do we have some questions?
Yeah. The one I wondered, I kind of missed this earlier. What was the alternate name suggested?
Carbon cashback.
Carbon cashback. Oh yeah, and somebody had put in the suggestion of, it would be great if it wasn't. Well, I don't know. You're saying monthly checks, because they were saying that if you got it back like at purchase or something like that. I don't know, like a loyalty card or something. But
well, at first it was like the idea would be because it was done a long time ago, and like, how do you mail everybody? It's harder to pay everyone easily. So you're thinking quarterly or yearly checks, and everyone would complain that you pay the higher prices today and you don't get the money back till later. So they said, look, we'll pay monthly, so there's no issue. You get
right.
money back the same time as you paid the higher prices.
And you may have answered this a little, but I want to hear it again. Oliver asked, how does all the fee and dividend tie up with $7 trillion total subsidies for fossil fuels globally?
Well, it's really separate from that, really. It helps offset a little bit of those subsidies in a sense by shifting the price higher. But
would it, I guess, is there any,
I don't know.
Is it so intractable?
It won't be raising $7 trillion. So I don't know. Actually, Katharine, do you know what the total raise would be once fully implemented? I used to know that number because you could figure out what it is. Or do you have a per family number? or per person number?
For the dividend?
Yeah, for the dividend.
Oh.
Once it gets up to, let's say, $100 a ton, that was what the number.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna mix up the numbers, but it was like a couple $100 per family of 4, I think.
No, but I think that's when it starts.
Yeah, I don't
Per
know.
month.
Well, if it's per month, it would be at maybe $100 a ton. It's thousands of dollars a year per family. I thought it was like $4,000 a year, on that order of magnitude. And by the way, it's the same for every person. So I always tell people, you and Bill Gates get the same check, or you and Elon Musk get the same check. You can pick any rich person you want and just compare it. And since they generate far more CO2 than you do, and actually you generate a lot of CO2 compared to everybody else, that we all do, but it turns out that the lower 70% of households make money on the deal, and the top 30% pay more in carbon fees than they get in dividends, but they won't notice because they're wealthy, and it'll be a relatively small amount of money for them.
Yeah. And as
I
far
have
as
sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay, thanks. As far as the subsidies go, I know in the US at least, the fossil fuel subsidies are like sort of the equivalent of like a, I guess, negative $5 per ton carbon price. Like that's sort of the effect they're having. So if we were to price the carbon fee and dividend price getting up to like $100, over $100 per ton of carbon dioxide is going to drive down emissions a lot more than the maybe like $5 per ton equivalent subsidies, like total subsidies that are happening. So it would definitely be great to get rid of the subsidies also, but like the carbon fee and dividend policy is really powerful compared
I think those are the direct subsidies.
the direct subsidies.
Yeah,
I
if
see.
you throw in Iran and Iraq wars and things like that, and all the wars over oil and infrastructure and pollution, I mean, it's really enormous, of course, once you really factor all the costs. And then you throw in climate change, and then it's kind of game over in terms of subsidies. But you're right. But it would help. It would help a lot. If it's $5 per ton. By the way, the way it works, it's the fee is on the equivalent CO2 emissions from a particular type of fossil fuel. So a ton of coal has a higher fee on it than a ton of natural gas, which theoretically, it's only theoretically, has lower emissions than coal. It actually has higher emissions than coal when you take into the fugitive emissions of methane. And then what else? There's
No, not with the hand waving. Shouldn't that be incorporated into it?
It should be, but it's not. In fact, that's why the U.S. it says, well, we've lowered our emissions, and one of the main ways we've lowered our emissions, we switched from coal to natural gas, because natural gas theoretically has half the emissions per kilowatt hour that coal does, but in reality, it immediately raises temperatures when you switch from coal to natural gas, because coal has pollution, which kills people, by the way, but it also reflects the sun and cools the earth. So when you switch from coal to natural gas, and then plus natural gas, any leakage of methane is 120 times more powerful than CO2, which overwhelms any savings from the lower CO2 emissions, equivalent CO2 emissions. Anyway, that's a whole separate show.
I'm going to riff on a comment that was made here. I think it was
Okay.
Oliver said about using AI to generate, the plan and the structure, the payments, etc. And I wondered how you felt as a young person about, because we got slammed. Dan was made a couple of title slides using AI, and they're like, how can you as a climate show use AI? Do you as a young person have any qualms about, I'm ambivalent, but I'm just curious if that's a thing for you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that we need huge systemic change, and that like I don't I don't think reducing my personal like carbon emissions or like AI or preventing AI use or something is gonna like solve the whole problem. So I don't know. I'm more focused on the trying to help make the system change. But That's a great question because we're already having all these like environmental problems, and then adding the AI is becoming so big, and that's also consuming huge amounts of resources. So I don't know. I feel like that's also a concern, but sorry, I don't really have a good answer
No,
to.
that's a
No,
great
no,
answer, by the
no.
way.
No, that works.
We need system solutions. The
Um,
voluntary individual solutions don't
Another
work,
riff.
actually.
And
There's
and
a
also the emissions from AI are still just a fraction of the real problem. I mean, you could zero it out, and we still have a huge problem that's getting worse, right?
Yeah, and people are using AI for all sorts of things. So I think using AI to advance climate solutions is probably a good use of it, if that
And we're
counts.
by the way, and just to be fair to AI out there, right now, this show is running through a data center that both YouTube, Restream, all the pieces of this show getting out to everyone is through a data center. The same kind of data center they use for AI, just that AI uses a lot more computation per piece of work it does, I guess, than YouTube does. But YouTube does a lot of stuff. You know, it's automatically translating this show and most videos into multiple languages, which is AI right there, and it's rescaling it. It does a lot of work to do this. So all of our use of the internet is involved in data center. Now, on the other hand, we often use the internet to visit people and have a conference like this without flying to do it. And so that actually is a reduction in emissions as well. So you got to look at the whole big thing. But the real solution is what Katharine is saying. You do a systems change, get rid of the fossil fuel emissions that are associated with all of these different things we're doing. Still leaves other problems, overconsumption and things like that. No question. Too much phosphorus use, on and on. But the climate one can be partially solved by phasing out fossil fuels, and then removing the excess CO2 we put up there already, and then cooling the earth while we're working on those other things as well.
I have one more riff and one more real question. The riff
Okay.
is there was discussion on peak oil. Have we reached peak oil? I didn't get the memo.
We reach peak regular oil. So the easy to get
Versus,
oil is peaked, and now we're getting it from hard to reach places, tar sands, deep water drilling and fracking and these kinds of things.
oh, that's so funny. I guess I was
What's the
thinking of
regular oil? Just
consumption, and I
regular.
don't know if we'll ever reach that versus production.
Yeah. So it's peak. I can't remember what's it called. Regular oil. I'm not sure. I don't remember the name, but
Okay.
Solar
and
and
that was a while
batteries.
ago actually that we reached that.
Solar
That's
and
what Nadia
batteries.
keeps saying.
Solar and batteries are an irresistible downward pressure that eventually will at some point fossil fuels will fall off a cliff.
So
Okay.
here's one here for Katharine.
Yes,
What
that
groups are
was the real
people
one from
object to
Jean.
this plan, carbon fee and dividend, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it is going to be bad for the fossil fuel industry financially. I think that's really the main, like, I guess, party that would be negatively impacted. Although there's still people and they need a healthy earth too. So I don't know. But financially,
I don't think they care.
well, yeah, even fossil fuel companies like Exxon have endorsed fee and dividend plans. I think maybe so, as opposed to other climate policies that are also going to put them out of business. This is straightforward and has other benefits. But I think there's also been some objections, or people are saying, like, why do we have the dividend? Why don't we spend the money on investing in renewable energy or something like that? And I think the carbon price is the most effective way to reduce emissions. So being able to use a dividend to then get the carbon price higher to have more of an impact is more reduces more emissions overall than if we were to invest that money in renewable energy we couldn't have as high a carbon price without hurting people. So yeah, that's a thought too. And then also there is objections about like, will this hurt people? But then usually financially, but then once people understand the dividend, that's less of an objection. I think also I hear a lot that like people think it's not possible and therefore it's not worth putting effort into advocating for, which I don't know. Like, I think it's super important and necessary, and I'm not expecting it to pass in the next like year or two, but I think it's important to try because it is so like would be such a great policy, and this is pretty urgent that we do something big about climate change. And like the IPCC is saying, like carbon pricing is a necessary component of ambitious climate policies, and it's not like and every developed country besides the US now has a carbon price in some form. So I think it's not as like it sort of sounds like it's almost too good to be true or something, but with all these other countries having carbon prices and the US has had all these bills to do this and bipartisan support and the carbon border adjustments that are starting to be charged, and there's all this grassroots work like working on this. I think it definitely is a possibility, and it's just more of a matter of like when and how exactly this carbon price happens. And I think it's definitely worth advocating for it to happen sooner and in a more ideal policy way.
And so I'm a huge supporter of this. I remember Dan talking about it in the very early days, and but the one thing that has nagged me about it over time is because I know he has said every citizen would be paid back.
Every legal resident.
Every legal resident. Okay, so would this be, or could this be used as an immigration tactic as well? Because
Well,
it
the
would
Republicans should
effectively
like that,
price
yeah.
out.
Because if you're an
Yeah.
illegal immigrant, you don't get a check, but you just pay the higher prices. Then it's still, I think you'd still be better off here than wherever you're coming from. But it's one more reason to go the legal route, and so you can get your check.
Does that exist these days?
Well, not these. I mean, these days everything is. By the way, you know, the objection these days is not. By the way, Katharine, you did a great job of summarizing the objections. But the objection these days is that climate change isn't real. You know, that's in the administration, right? That's their official thing. So that's insane. You know, so that's the objection within the administration. But that's going to go away because it turns out climate change is real. Well, who knew? But it turns out, and we're going to all find out later this year and next year how real that all is with the Super El Nino coming, and it's going to really push things. And so, but the reality, and it's funny, Katharine, that you mentioned that they don't believe it can be done. I always found that the number one objection whenever I explained fee and dividend to people was they didn't believe that the government would do something that intelligent or that good. And I said, well, it must be a really good policy if the number one objection is that they don't believe governments could ever do something like that because it's made too much sense or something. so I always thought that was that was pretty good. So, and the other objection, he said, as I mentioned, that ExxonMobil supports it theoretically, but a different version where the price doesn't go up too high. And because they were worried about the fact that this could pass. So they basically, put a fake version in that people could support and that kind of thing. So there's, the game's going to change in a few years. I mean, both politics are going to swing back, number one, but number two, climate change impacts are growing and there's going to be demand to do something about it. This is one of the easiest, really powerful things you can do. Something that actually helps the economy. It has all the, creates jobs. It does all these positive things. And the only real objections that the fossil fuel companies don't want to, let this kind of thing happen. But you also got to remember that there's, I think, twice as much money spent on renewable energy deployment like last year than on fossil fuel extraction. So there really is a change, even though politically fossil fuel companies still have a stranglehold on politicians, but that's not going to last forever. Hey, Catherine, we're up on the hour, so I think it's probably a great time to end it. And I want to thank you for all you've done. I want to encourage everyone to get in touch with you or get in touch with the movement and get more schools involved. We have to build this thing up. And I want to thank you so much for all the work you've been doing.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me and for talking about this. And thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah. And again, you can see Catharine's TEDx talk, a link in the description. Go watch that, like it, leave a comment. Let's build up the views on that one. Mine always been around a long time. It has a lot of views already. But if you haven't seen it, go watch that one too. And anyway, thanks for everyone for joining us on Climate Chat. And don't forget to also like and subscribe to Climate Chat. And we will see you next time, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.